Great. Hey, everybody, let me just make sure this is working. All right, great. I think it's going. So, how is everyone's group? Catherine and Avery, what did y'all talk about?
Yeah, I can share a couple of things we discussed. So I was with Kevin, Alessandra, Heather, and Ariana. And sort of one of the main components we discussed was like the idea of taking this as like a craft project and sort of merging it with a sort of tech side. And the way to do that specifically through like engaging through collaboration and the sort of social aspect of it. So we discussed a couple of ideas through like using Zoom um, to actually engage in like the co-creation process and try to share ideas with other patrons or riff off each other's ideas. But also a way to watch the videos. So we also discussed a lot how like it's interesting to read about the testing strategies and see images, but the things that's most engaging are actually to see them in action. Because those can sort of inspire like, oh, this is how I should be testing my Cube satellite. And Alessandra had a lot of great examples of how to take the testing strategies to the next level. Like one thing we didn't discuss in much detail was like a drop test and how that can be even, how you can even use a drop test as part of your experimentation in terms of like testing out your payload, testing out the method of like maybe space art that you want to do, and also at the same time, of course, testing the structure of your CubeSat. So that was really great.
Cool.
Yeah. We also had a great chat in my breakout room. A few of the really interesting ideas. Philip mentioned that he really appreciated sort of the different levels of engagement that the activity provided, and that it could sort of be tailored to suit the interests and needs or ability levels of the group that you want to run this activity with. And, you know, from the PLIX team perspective, like I just wanted to, I just loved to hear that because that's sort of one of our goals in designing all of our activities, to sort of make them remixable and like customizable to the needs of your patrons, and that our librarian collaborators can hopefully feel welcome and invited to do so with the activity, because we sort of know that you bring expertise to the table that we don't necessarily have about your own community. Dave had some great ideas for thinking through, you know, if you want to try and run one of these more sort of technically oriented payloads, but at a distance, like how do you provide support to people maybe when they're struggling or they're frustrated? And, you know, some of that frustration is like good for them to work through on their own, but like at what point do you want to somehow be available to help them? He's been playing around with a tool called Flipgrid as a way of sort of like being able to send videos back and forth asynchronously. So a patron could sort of be like, hey, I'm having this problem with this microbit. And then like Dave could see it and then be able to reply with a video. I thought that was a really nice idea of offering support at a distance. And then Mariel also just pointed out that another nice aspect of this activity is how it sort of mashes like high and low tech together, because you're learning about something very technical, outer space, the sort of physics, the constraints, the technology, the software, all of these testing strategies. But then when we're, you know, sort of implementing it, we can also just do it with cardboard and recycled materials and art supplies. So it makes it a really accessible way, like a low tech way of learning about a high tech thing. And I also thought that was just a really nice way of putting it.
Cool. I think one of the questions my group talked about was how do you, how do you collaborate on perhaps building a CubeSat or a FruitSat together when you're at a distance? And Tina from Queens Public Library had brought up, you know, maybe that's not possible right now. So you can share like your prototypes or sketches together as a group. But I think Flipgrid would actually be a great way to maybe do something around that. So that's a great idea. That we were talking a lot about like resources for collaboration. and I hadn't thought about that. So that's good. Tina had also brought up a concern of like making this activity as with as little like computer time as possible. So maybe there's only just like a small or a short recap as a group or a launch video. So that was something we talked about. Deborah from NYPL also talked about how this can work as like a make and take activity that she's doing in New York, and that I know a lot of other librarians are doing because it's also just like a great way to use up resources you already have in the library. So those were some concrete things we talked about. Yeah, we talked a lot about ideas and resources. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, sort of related to that, it made me think of another thing that came up in our breakout session, which is Phil sort of said that you could sort of, you know, encourage folks to sign up for this by saying like, hey, save those recyclables, you know, save those milk cartons, save those egg cartons, and like bring them, and you're gonna make a CubeSat. And like, do you know what a CubeSat is? Like, maybe come to this session to find out, as like kind of like a way of getting people in the door.
Cool.
I like that idea. And I also just want to mention that Paula put in the chat how that this session could connect with some virtual sessions that they're already doing with NASA, or like connect with some local schools that are doing space related work, or the school seems to be named after an astronaut. That's really cool. We love thinking about different ways that this can connect in with existing programs or experts that are in your community. This is, I think, in particular, a great program to bring in like a local partner, or maybe someone from a university, or someone who's an engineer, to just sort of just talk about their career and their experience with these types of things as sort of an added programming aspect to this program. And the stuff that NASA does is always really cool. They have great educational resources. We love to pull them in. Yeah, I don't know, Avery, if you have any other thoughts about those kinds of things.
Yeah, so, and like this also came up in our group, like, because like access to these like massive facilities is so difficult, like it's really good to rely on the videos because you just get like such a great visual for the sort of understanding. And what's great is that particularly with CubeSats, which are sort of like opening up the satellite landscape to more people, more and more groups are building out their own satellites. So they have examples of testing, not only from companies, but over the last couple of weeks, I've just been seeing a lot more videos from like college groups or high school groups. Not necessarily building actual CubeSat satellites, but testing out different technologies, using like LEDs and flashlights and microbits and Arduinos to actually test these technologies. And so it sort of like we were talking about that multimodal engagement, it can like bridge many different levels of understanding. So I'm going to be rounding out more of the resource page on the activity repository for this, just to include some of those more sort of easy to engage with videos in addition to NASA.
Cool. I also just want to point out another concern that Paula had brought up, which is, what we talked about, the synchronous collaboration. I think something we talked about in my group was just like making this kind of a family activity, and the family collaborating on the CubeSat. That doesn't always mean that like all the troubleshooting is figured out. You'd still have to probably do some connecting with either your peers or with the librarian. But I think kind of tweaking this to make it a family activity would definitely make that more successful. Though I also know when I collaborate on things with my family, sometimes we get a little angry with each other. So it's a team building exercise. Cool. All right. Avery, Catherine, any last thoughts? Anything else you want to highlight from your group?
I don't think so. I would just say, you know, we're looking forward to seeing everyone again next week. We're going to talk a little bit about, you know, launching these and collecting data, maybe brainstorm as a group ways that we might make that happen virtually, or not virtually, like at a distance, remotely. Yeah, and then I think in the meantime, please feel free to use the PLIX forum to share any questions or ideas or things that you're thinking about. We really love to see how y'all are implementing these programs and want to support you in any way we can. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with.
Great. Thanks. All right, everyone. We'll wrap up for today, and you'll get a wrap up from me and a new post in the forum. Otherwise, oh, one more thing. If you have any space song recommendations for us to play at the beginning of next week, or like maybe we can make a collaborative space playlist, you should definitely drop those in the chat. All right.
We do have a Spotify playlist. I'll put it in the chat.
Great.
And
okay.
It's collaborative, so anyone can add to it.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, folks. Thanks.
Bye.